Welcome to this workshop on attracting hummingbirds to your yard. My name is Danielle Carlock, and I'm from the Maricopa Native Seed Library. In this workshop, we're going to talk about the different ways you can attract hummingbirds to your spaces at home. And we're going to look at some of the general principles of attracting hummingbirds, and then look specifically at what plants will help to attract and support them. Just some information on the Maricopa Native Seed Library. We're a service of the Maricopa Community Colleges, and we provide free seed and education to make it easy to incorporate native plants into whatever type of space you have at home, whether it's a yard, a patio, a balcony. So just wanted to give some background there, and that is the website of the Maricopa Native Seed Library. So there's a couple of things that hummingbirds need in your garden. The first thing is having a diversity of plants. Think about different layers. You know, trees are your taller layers, then you have your shrubs kind of in a mid-zone, and perennials and some succulents are at different heights. But having a diversity of plants, a multi-layered landscape, is going to provide the most habitat for hummingbirds and many of the other creatures that we want to attract and support in our yard, such as butterflies and other pollinators. So a diversity of plants, even if you start small and in the first year you add just a couple and then each year you add more. But thinking about that diversity is important. Also, and we're going to go through a whole list of plants that you could incorporate, but it's not necessary to incorporate all of them. But as you incorporate them, think about including more than one of each plant you select and grouping them together so it's easier for the birds to locate them, although typically I find that they generally do a pretty good job of finding nectar plants, but it is a good idea to kind of start off, and also having multiple plants in the same area that are supporting hummingbirds will allow them to kind of space themselves out from each other because they are a bit territorial. Another important principle is making sure that the nectar is available year-round. And how you might do this is being intentional about the plants you select, then their bloom periods. And you can look up the bloom periods online and see what time of year are these plants blooming, and make sure you're covering all 12 months. A lot of hummingbirds are here year-round. I have hummingbirds every month of the year in my garden, and so I'm trying to make sure I always have something blooming. So that's a really important principle. Also, open space is important. They want to view their territory. They would like to keep an eye out for other hummingbirds and chase after them. So having places like perches where they can view their territory, and then areas where they can also hide or nest, dense foliage is important. And that kind of goes back to that idea of having a diversity of plants. Another important practice is to avoid using pesticides and insecticides as much as possible, because the pesticides will harm the plants that the hummingbirds are relying on. And hummingbirds are also a big predator on insects. They eat a lot of insects. So insecticides are not going to be helpful to them meeting their dietary needs. So those would be two things to keep in mind. And instead, look up online integrated pest management, which is a way of naturally increasing beneficial wildlife and discouraging wildlife that could be more harmful. So as far as hummingbird feeders, it's generally better to provide native plants than feeders, but feeders can provide an important supplement, and actually many people include both. So here at my home I have a variety of native plants that the hummingbirds can use, as well as feeders. But there are a couple of principles to keep in mind if you decide to go this route of having feeders. First of all, you should not be using any red dye. It is not necessary, and it's actually likely harmful to the birds. Instead, it should be a sugar-water mixture, 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. Also, it's really important once you make the commitment to feeders to always keep them going, because the birds will count on them. And they do seem to get into quite a bit of distress when the feeders are down. So that even if there's plants, because it just becomes part of their habit and practice, is they're looking for those feeders, and they're counting on them. So that would be important. Also, it's important to commit to cleaning the feeders at least once a week, and more often in the summer. There is black mold that can form in the feeders, and it's very harmful to the birds. It will infect their mouths and their tongue, and it will lead to their death. So I please encourage you very strongly that if you're going to use feeders, to commit to keeping those clean and using the mild bleach formula for that purpose. So let's look at the palette of plants that I recommend. And again, it doesn't have to be all these plants, but you could start out with a few and add. You may find you already have some of these in your yard. And also, the plants that I'm recommending are all generally available in nurseries, so you can find them here locally. You may have to go to a couple of nurseries to get everything you might be looking for, but they are available in nurseries, so it shouldn't be a wild goose chase to find these plants by going to one or more nurseries. Let's take a look at trees. There is one tree that I really recommend, and that is the desert willow. As you can see in this picture, it has some really pretty pink flowers. There's some other colors they come in depending on the variety that you choose. And they have a long bloom period, which is important to our birds. You can see the flowers are tubular and they tend to be fragrant. But if you want to be sure that you're getting a fragrant plant, make sure to visit the nursery and only select ones that are actually blooming so you can smell the flowers and see what you're getting. Another thing to know is that the desert willow does go dormant in the winter. It'll lose its leaves probably around December and not get them back till March. So if you're going to use a desert willow, maybe put it in an area where there's going to be other plants that are vibrant in the winter and blooming in the winter. So that will take away from that sort of, that look that you're having of, kind of that winter look that the desert willow is going to have. But it is a low water use tree, and it's beneficial to more than just hummingbirds. So it'll be valuable to other wildlife as well. Now, there's a lot of shrubs that will support hummingbirds, and if you take a look at this list, you might recognize some of the names. Some of them you may already have in your yards. And so we'll go through these and kind of break it down a couple at a time. So let's take a look at these. And first we have the Justicias. Now, Justicia is the genus for this particular group of plants. You can see they all are Justicia, and then they have their specific name, their species name, Californica, and so on and so forth are listed there. So there's 3. And they're all good hummingbird plants. You can notice the flowers are the type that are typically the tubular or a landing pad there for these plants. And so let's talk about Chuparosa first, which is the one here in the red flowers at the top. If you're going to only plant a few types of plants for hummingbirds, this is one of the ones I highly recommend. And that's because it's a long bloomer and it's low maintenance in the yard. And it can take full sun. I have several of these out in my front yard in full sun with no drip system. And they thrive. They bloom most months of the year. I do see maybe in the summer it might get a little bit, might not be much in the way of blooming in the summer, but they tend to bloom in the winter, which is an important time to be able to provide for hummingbirds when a lot of other things aren't blooming. So the other 2, Mexican honeysuckle and the Sonoran honeysuckle, they may be a little bit harder to find, especially the Sonoran one. I have seen the Mexican one at a lot of nurseries. And with that one, I would definitely look at kind of partial shade for that. Low to moderate water. If you're in partial shade, you'll probably have to water it less, especially in the summer. And then the Sonoran honeysuckle, full to partial sun. Partial sun and partial shade, kind of, they mean the same thing. It's a half and half. Anytime you see a plant that lists as for recommendations as either full or partial sun, I do tend to move more toward the partial because of our climate and the amount of sun and heat that we have and the duration that we have it for. So I think it's good to err more on the side of the partial sun for any plants that have that listed. Let's look at some orange flowering shrubs starting here in the top left. orange bells. There's also yellow bells too, which is similar, but the flowers are yellow. Tubular flowers that are highly attractive to hummingbirds, and they bloom a long period. So this is another one that if you're only going to have a few, I highly recommend it because of the long bloom. And it's very attractive. It's almost tropical, looks great around a pool, and it's a full sun plant. The only drawback is that it can be frost sensitive and it will die back in a frost, and it'll take a few months to come back. It's a quick grower, comes back quickly, but might be a couple of months where it's not going to look so great. But otherwise, it's a great plant, but I also would recommend that it would probably be on supplemental water, which means drip system, because it's got maybe a little bit of a higher water need than some other types of plants. And similarly, also for desert honeysuckle, this next one here, this orange flowered plant, sun or partial sun. I have one that's probably getting a little bit of a blocking of the western sun. That's another thing too, is when you see partial sun, if you could at least give it some relief in the late afternoon when the western sun's coming down, if there's a tree or something that's going to give it a little bit of shade. So any of those partial sun, that's another way to tackle that, is try to at least, if there's not a tree directly over it, at least one that's going to cast some shade onto it in the late afternoon. Woolly butterfly bush is actually a butterfly plant as well. And of these four, it's the one that can tolerate the lowest water. That one probably would want some supplemental water in the summer, but it's going to do well in a lower water environment and full sun. And then the hummingbird trumpet, partial sun's probably a better idea, and it does require supplemental water. Let's look at some plants that are more in the pink and red range. This one on the top you probably recognize. It's in a lot of commercial landscapes here in the valley and many home landscapes, the red bird of paradise. Full sun plant, but supplemental water would be a good idea. There is some frost sensitivity there, so you might have to, have a few months where it's not looking so good while it's recovering. And then the pink berry duster is a full sun plant, low water. I have that also in my front yard, full sun and a drip system, and watering it maybe once a week in the summer. They can have some leaf drop, under those kind of conditions. They won't look as good. If you want them to look better, you'd have to water them probably more often in the summer. But they can survive on very low water. Also is a good bee attracting plant. So now some purple flowered shrubs starting from the top. What changes here is you can see for each of these three recommendations, it says a name of a genus and then SP. That means species, like it means there's multiple species that can be recommended. Because for each of these, the nurseries may have more than one choice of species. And so that would just come down to ones that you might like better, or talking more with the folks at the nursery about recommendations, one compared to the other. But since there's a wide range, it's hard to recommend certain ones. The leucophyllums, a type of sage, they're all generally full sun and low water use. You're probably seeing them September. They tend to have another flush of bloom. I'm seeing a lot of them bloom right now, and that's a good low water use plant. The Ruellias are also low water use, but maybe tending a little bit more to partial sun, and there are several species available. And then the wolfberry is the largest of these three. I think I have ones that are getting up to, they're taller than me. They're probably could be about 7 feet tall, 6 or 7 feet tall for sure. And the wolfberry is also a bee attractor. You can see in the picture there's a bee using one of the flowers for nectar. And another interesting thing about wolfberry is the berries are edible. This is a plant related to the goji berry, and although those are native to China, this is our native lycium, and there's several species. Also, they would benefit from supplemental water, especially in the summer. They'll have a lot of leaf drop and not look so great in the summer without some supplemental water. Or if you want to have a more natural desert landscape, then it would just be a matter of kind of tolerating some of that, not looking so good in the summer. But that is another good one as well. But taller, you want to make sure that you give it plenty of room because it also can get pretty wide as well. Now, perennials are plants that live for multiple years, but they're typically, smaller than shrubs. And we have 4 here, starting with the evening primrose. Several species, but this pink one is the most common one you'll see. I recommend it for partial sun, probably filtered sun, which we haven't talked about yet. That's where you're having plants that are situated under trees that provide a nice filtered, not a full shade, but a filtered sun, such as Palo Verde or ironwood. Those are the kind of the 2 main ones. Mesquite can have a little more shade, but could still be another option. And so this type of environment is they're getting some good filtered sun, but not too strong under these type of environments. And they'll require less water. Our next plant is a type of salvia. These are very, typically can be very fragrant plants, full or partial sun. For that one, I have seen them do well in full sun. However, the ones I've seen are on drip. So there's several to choose from. The one in the picture is the Cleveland sage, which is highly fragrant. Our next picture here is one of penstemons. Now, penstemons are an important North American native found throughout the country. There's lots of different penstemons. In our nurseries here, you'll probably be able to find at least 3 or 4 different species that will grow well at our climate. This one is called the desert penstemon with fuchsia flowers. There's also one that's a red flowered, a firecracker penstemon, and Parry's penstemon, which is similar to this desert penstemon. They're definitely low water use, full sun plants. I have some, and they tend to reseed in your yard. So you might start out with a few, and then over the years you'll find new plants coming up in different locations, and they sort of start to change, where you originally maybe had wanted them growing. Now they're over in a different area instead. So they're gonna do a lot of that kind of reseeding, and then they also, when they're not blooming, they just typically look, they're kind of small and not very obvious in the landscape. So they'll kind of blend into the background when they're not blooming, and then you'll have this spectacular sort of 2-month-long bloom in the spring with the penstemons. And again, if there's only a couple things I recommend for the yard, this would be it, just because of how spectacular the blooms are, and that they're easy care, and that they will reseed, and they attract hummingbirds. So there's a lot of benefits to having some penstemons in your yard. And then finally here, the verbenas, more of a purple flowered, or some could be more pink. They can grow more like a ground cover. Maybe more toward partial sun with some supplemental water would be good for verbenas. Now, if you haven't observed hummingbirds on succulents, you might be surprised to see these in the list, but all of these plants pictured are good hummingbird plants when they're in bloom. The ocotillo here at the top left, red tubular flowers that hummingbirds really will go crazy over. And these are, for the most part, low water plants. Some need a little more sun than shade, partial sun than others. Let's look at the yucca. Yuccas are can be large plants. You want to provide a lot of space for them, similar to the ocotillo, and they will provide good nectar. Also could be good bee plants, and they're full sun plants. The third one is the lady slipper, which is a succulent. Probably would tend more towards partial sun for that one, but also low water. Then we have agaves. There's many different types of agaves. The selections will vary at the nurseries. This one here is one of the smaller agaves. For agaves, I would recommend to consider some partial sun or filtered shade or filtered sun. A lot of them will get sunburned if they're out in full sun. Some can tolerate it more than others. The really large agave americana can tolerate full sun, but I found a lot of the others need some partial, some protection, especially from the late afternoon summer sun. And we have hesperellos and aloes. Hesperello here with the red tubular flowers, low water use plant. And then the aloe, which is also low water, but that one, those would do best in some partial sun. I have some growing under trees that are doing really well. You can see the green leaves. When they're under sun stress, getting too much sun, the leaves will start to turn red or brown, and that's a good sign that you should probably dig it up and move it somewhere else. And these do transplant really easily. So if you started out somewhere where it's such a great spot, you can move those around. And you can see that it's making more and more plants, and it keeps kind of growing and expanding. And you can take out and divide those out as well. So now I just want to mention 3 plants that are available in the seed library. So if you're interested in trying to grow from seed, these are ones you can get from us for free. Even if you just want to try growing from seed, especially the snapdragon vine does germinate easily. The other 2 are native hibiscus. So these are really cool plants, unusual plants. They're out, if you're out on the hiking trails, you can see these plants. They're not particularly common, but they're out there. But where they're not common is in the nursery. So you won't be able to find these. I don't think I've seen any of these at the nurseries here in the valley. So if you might be interested in trying from seed, these are 3 that are hummingbird plants that I recommend. So if you're looking for more information, a couple things here. There's a couple of links that I have here to more information about attracting hummingbirds and about hummingbirds in Arizona. But I also wanted to make you aware that the Seed Library offers free native landscape consultations, either in person at your home or virtually, where we will work with you to provide customized recommendations for whatever your landscape is, no matter what the size, for whatever the purpose is, whether you're looking to attract hummingbirds or you're looking to have a low maintenance yard or attract pollinators. We'll work with you to come up with customized recommendations for your landscape. And please do reach out to us. This is our email address and our web address. So we'd love to hear from you. If you want to schedule a consultation, you could email us. Or if you want to obtain seed, you can contact us or look at the places that we're at on our webpage to obtain free seed. And also, if you have any questions about the workshop, we'd be happy to answer those as well. Thank you very much.